Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome into the Bucknuts Morning Five-ish here on Monday, March 28th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle, joined by the Dean of Ohio State football recruiting, Bill Kurelic. Bill, let's start off talking about quarterback Tate Martell, Las Vegas Bishop Gorman. What is the latest with the talented quarterback? What do the listeners need to know?
Well, he flew into Columbus on Wednesday, later in the day on Wednesday, and started his visit, so to speak, on Wednesday evening with dinner with Urban Meyer, J.T. Barrett at the Eddie George Grill 27. So, things got off, I think, to a good start in that regard. Then the actual visit was on Thursday, came back again on Friday morning before leaving, flying out Friday afternoon. And, by all accounts, he was very impressed. Everyone I talked to said that the visit went extremely well. He was very impressed. Didn't flip. That was to be expected. He wasn't going to just fly into Columbus and flip his commitment. That wasn't going to happen. He still has got ways to go in the recruiting process. He's going to visit Texas A&M, where he's still committed to at this point. He'll visit Texas A&M on Friday. And then I expect the recruiting process to continue. I don't think there's going to be any finality to this for quite some time. Talking to people that are pretty close to Martell, they don't think so either. My gut feeling is that it's at best 50-50 that he ends up staying with his commitment to Texas A&M. I think it's not out of the question, but certainly far from a certainty. Ohio State was very impressive to him. It's just too early to predict what he's going to do at this point. There's 10 months approximately till National Signing Day, and I don't think this one's going to be, a short recruitment, so to speak, where he's just going to end up saying the recruiting is over, I've shut it all down, and this is where I'm going.
Something I find interesting is Tate Martell's grandfather is a 1968 graduate of Ohio State. I know everybody knows this by now. I had no idea going into Tate Martell's visit that his grandfather was a Buckeye graduate. Again, 1968, and that was a special year for Ohio State with them winning the national championship that fall, really on January 1st, 1969 in the Rose Bowl over O.J. Simpson and the USC Trojans, of course. So talk about Tate Martell's grandfather being an Ohio State graduate. And let me ask you this as well. Let's say he decommits from Texas A&M. I know that's a huge assumption, but let's take them out of the equation. What is your gut feeling at that point? Would Ohio State be the leader? Would they just be in the mix somewhere? If you take Texas A&M out of the equation, where would the Buckeyes be?
I think right now Ohio State would be at the top if you took A&M out of the list. You look at the visit he had, and as you mentioned, his grandfather going to Ohio State, and there was a picture on Bucknuts.com of his grandfather and all, and there's a background there and a history there, and when you look at it, 5'10", 5'11" quarterbacks are not by any means the norm in major college football, but Martell is so good, and what Ohio State does is such a good fit for him. I think Ohio State would be the leader if you take A&M out of the mix. Irreverent spread offense, of course, features the quarterback and the things that Tate can do. And if you look at the two programs, they are good fits for him in a lot of different ways. Now, of course, Ohio State has Haskins coming in, Dwayne Haskins, Joe Burrow's still there. So the path to a starting job would not be quick necessarily at Ohio State. But as I mentioned in what I am hearing, Tate is supremely confident. He's not going to be scared off by a recruit at another school. On the other hand, Texas A&M, the path to a starting job is pretty quick. I think it'd be surprising if he didn't go in there and become a starter relatively quickly at Texas A&M.
Tyjon Lindsey, same deal with him. What is your gut feeling with Tyjon Lindsey?
Well, things went extremely well with Lindsey over the weekend, and everything from all of the tweets, and the periscopes and everything else that Lindsey put out, and then talking to people that were at Ohio State this weekend, everything went extremely well. I think some people are automatically putting him in the recruiting class at this point. I think that's a little premature. I certainly think it could happen. No question about that. I think Ohio State did a great job with him over the weekend, but he's not ready to make an announcement yet on his decision. He has mentioned that he's going to likely announce sometime during the summer, and obviously there's a lot that can happen between now and the summer. So, well, I would, if I had to predict right now, I would go with Ohio State as the place that Tyjon Lindsey ends up. But again, his recruitment's not over. USC is not going to give up. He's heading. He's back to California, and there's going to be a lot of pressure to stay home, so to speak. USC is going to do everything they can to get him. So I think this one's got a ways to go yet. But again, Ohio State put themselves in a great position with Lindsey having a great visit over the weekend.
I take it you have not put a crystal ball in for Tyjon Lindsey yet?
Not yet. I want to see what happens once he gets back and he's in California for a little while and see how things play out there. Again, sometimes visits, they are spectacular and they can wear off. And I want to see in this case, how Tyjon Lindsey feels after he's been back to California for a little bit. But again, if I had to make a prediction right now, I would go with Ohio State, but I'm not ready to put that crystal ball in there yet on him.
I like it. All right, switching gears, another big-time prospect from out west, Haskell Garrett, Bishop Gorman High School. High school is Tate Martell. He's committed to Ohio State, and it sounds like he absolutely loved his visit. Is he now a solid commit?
Yeah, I think to me that was maybe the biggest news of the weekend, just because you look at Ohio State's defensive tackle recruiting, and the knock, so to speak, and I have not necessarily subscribed to this, is that the knock has been that Ohio State could not bring in an elite defensive tackle since Urban has been at Ohio State. And, they did bring in one, in my opinion, certainly in Adolphus Washington. Now, he didn't come in as a defensive tackle necessarily, and he, came in right at the beginning, of when Urban took over. Urban getting the job really sealed the deal on that one. But to me, he turned out to be a tremendous offensive tackle for the Buckeyes. But obviously they missed out on a few guys for the 2016 class. They would have loved to have had Antoine Jackson, for instance, and, they went hard early for Rashawn Gary, and then you had Rashard Lawrence and so on. They didn't get those guys. So when they got a commitment from somebody like a Haskell Garrett, who is the country's number 4 defensive tackle prospect, that was huge. But he went ahead and visited Notre Dame, and he even mentioned visiting there again, making an official visit. So when he told me on Saturday afternoon, and I put that on Bucknuts right away, when he told me on Saturday afternoon that he had such a great visit to Ohio State, had shut down his recruitment, and was completely 100% solid to the Buckeyes, I think that was perhaps the biggest news of the weekend, because he is that good. I mean, as defensive tackles go, he is an absolute difference maker, and he's a guy that I think is absolutely huge in this class. And, when he first committed to Ohio State, I really felt good after talking to him about Ohio State's chances as far as Buckeye Nation goes. I felt good about that for Ohio State, that he would stick with Ohio State. And I talked to his coach and felt good as far as the chances for Buckeye and to keep him. And now with his visit, I think, the odds are just very, very high that he stays with Ohio State. Again, you never know. I mean, there is still a ways to go through the recruiting process. As I mentioned, 10 more months to go. But certainly, if you're an Ohio State fan, you've got to feel great about Haskell Garrett and what happened last week when he visited. Absolutely. And another Buckeye commitment in the 2017 class I want to ask you about. Last recruiting question here before we move on to something else. Todd Sibley, running back out of Akron-Hoban. My question for you, sir, what percentage chance do you give Todd Sibley of signing with the Buckeyes in February? Well, I'm not changing. I still think I've said all along, my feeling is Todd Sibley will be a Buckeye. There's been a lot of talk that, with J.K. Dobbins coming into the class, and by the way, he is going to visit Ohio State this week. But with J.K. Dobbins coming in, and with the possibility of Cam Akers perhaps joining the class, that Todd Sibley would not be in the class. But Todd has said all along he's not afraid of competition, and as he puts it, bring it on. And I'm going to go with what Todd says, that he intends to be a part of this Buckeye recruiting class. So while again, I wouldn't say it's 100% because, again, it's 10 months till National Signing Day. So I wouldn't say it's 100%, but I think the odds are pretty high. And I've said all along that until Todd, indicates anything different at all, and he has not done that so far, until he indicates anything different at all, I'm going to feel like he's going to be a Buckeye. So, I would say 75% or better that he will be a Buckeye. And, again, that's probably a low estimation. Again, he's indicated no desire to go anywhere else.
Bill, you are the Dean of Ohio State football recruiting, but you also follow basketball very closely. You're a basketball fan, former basketball coach. Let's talk a little bit Ohio State basketball here to close the show. Sophomore center Trevor Thompson's testing the NBA draft waters, he's announced over the weekend. Now, he's not going to hire an agent. He can still return to Ohio State. This is a new NCAA rule this year. It's really an old NCAA rule that they're bringing back. They actually had this rule many years ago. I don't know why they ever did away with it. Maybe because people were taking advantage of the rule, like Kentucky with their entire team declaring. What is your take on this, just from a global perspective about this new rule, and specifically about Trevor Thompson, him testing the waters? What do you think will happen with him?
Well, I think the first general most people had was, what? Trevor Thompson is going to the NBA draft. I think, and again, that's not a knock on Trevor Thompson. It's just that most people who watched Ohio State this year, I think, would say that on the Ohio State basketball team this year, there wasn't anyone that's ready to play right now in the NBA. So I think that, that was a general feeling that people were, what's going on here, surface on face value. But, when you look at the rule and all, it's very understandable. I mean, you can go test the water, so to speak, and go through the process a little bit and still come back. So why not try it? Why not get a little taste of, what it's like, and then you can simply come back and play. I mean, to be honest, if Trevor would leave Ohio State, I think that the chances of him playing in Greece or somewhere like that are pretty, or the D-League or whatever, are pretty high. I mean, to be on an NBA team out of college, you've got to be very ready. Now, obviously, a lot of people go and they aren't ready, but I think that they find it's a mistake. I think Trevor Thompson is going to be a good player for Ohio State next year. In fact, you and I have talked about this, Dave. We both think Ohio State's going to be pretty darn good next year with all the guys they have coming back and all that. So I think Trevor Thompson is going to be a good player for Ohio State next year. I expect him to take advantage of this rule. Again, why not try to take advantage of this rule? I expect him to come back to Ohio State, and I expect him to be a good player, and Ohio State basketball team be much improved next season.
Great stuff, as always, out of the Dean of Ohio State football recruiting, Bill Kurelic. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you to the listeners out there for tuning into the show. Hope everyone has a great day. Take it away, best damn band in the land.